early music, bluegrass music. So it's all here. I just want to mention that this coming weekend after Thanksgiving, the shop will be open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In fact, on Friday, we have two readers that, two Long Island readers that you know, David Axelrod, who's up from Stony Brook, and his wife Joan J.C. Henn. And they'll be here on Friday at 3 o'clock. And then after that, on Sunday at 3 o'clock, there'll be a prose reading by a man from East Hampton named Jack Rudin. So, that said, we just started. I'd like to first mention that today we have with us two Daniels. One Daniel and one Dan. Daniel Thomas Moran, who's Moran, I'm sorry. Daniel Moran, who's reading here for the first time, all the way from Suffolk County, across the water. And Dan Murray, who's read here before, and welcome back. Why don't we start with Daniel Moran, and welcome you to Suffolk. Right up here, some of the expensive seats.
Well, as Canio said, this is really one of the first times I've ever read in public. I've written for a very long time, but I've never actually exposed myself to public scrutiny at all. So this is sort of a first for me. I did read a couple of, and a few open readings in West Hampton Beach in the last couple of years, but this is really the first time that I've read a number of my things. I'll try to give a little explanation about each one before I read it. Maybe that will help. And they're on a variety of different subjects, and I hope that you enjoy them. The first poem was written for a friend on Shelter Island, who's an elderly gentleman who encouraged me to read a lot of the great masters. And after speaking to him, I went home and read Wordsworth at his request and wrote this poem that's called For George Lewis After Wordsworth. It's basically sort of a reflection of my respect for the old masters. A ladle dipped in ancient well, to touch the chiming poet's bell. Dare I stroke this page with fevered quill, submerge my soul in waters still, raise dust along this hallowed path, presume to have what others have. Those yester thoughts of gifted bards, dancing thunder-footed in a house of cards, their voices join in madrigal chorus, from the shelves of death can still implore us. Forgive me this dream which I presume to create a quill from modest plume, to taste the tears from wordsmith's eyes, kiss the stars through stormy skies, mine diamonds from this murky lock, chisel soft truths on plates of rock. I pray life breath does not succumb before I've plucked this sacred plum. The second poem is one that I read in West Hampton, which is a love poem from my wife, who's sitting in front of me here with my new daughter. She's probably the youngest person ever to attend a poetry reading. She's 10 days old. This is fairly self-explanatory. It's called Love by Name. What man has lived to know such fortune, having trudged through gray velvet dusk, over cobblestone cracks and rain-beat streets, and coming upon the most magnificent gem lying still and naked in the lonely dust, unnoticed by all of the many pairs of sad eyes who gaze to the sky in search of their gold, and I who was visited upon by saints whispering destiny in my ear, as I lay chilled in my rust-conquered bed, sparkling about me like new dreams of starscapes in winter skies. Her stare cut me like a sun-up saber shaft, her face swathed in dew-mist mystery. But her soul I knew as well as the forever beat of my alabaster heart. Her fingertips soft as a cat's smoky tail. She spoke in sweet love-hush whispers, with the reassurance of a mother's clutch, on a crackling electric thunderclap midnight, such fortune to dream deep of a love, and come to call her by name. The next one has a small story behind it. When the Pope was coming to the United States to visit, he was going to visit Los Angeles, and there was a story on the news that I happened to see which got a lot of national attention. he was supposed to visit a cathedral in Los Angeles. And one of the problems that they had for security reasons and otherwise was that there was a group of homeless people who lived in a flat across the street from the cathedral. And in order that the Pope not be offended or have a problem with security, the police rousted all these homeless people out of there. And I wrote this poem after hearing that story. It's called The Pope Does L.A. Today the Pope himself came to L.A. in the fisherman's shoes and a Rolex, not on a burrow-crossed palm, but in a bulletproof caddy, across petrochemical pebbles, watched ever so vigilantly by armed men in blue, as the Lord watches over the lilies of the field. And they chased the downtrodden, sleeping in the cathedral's shadow, so His Holiness wouldn't be offended by these drunks wrapped in cardboard.
Is there a pale blue Nissan SXU in my driveway?
Start from the beginning.
Okay. Today the Pope himself came to L.A. in the fisherman's shoes and a Rolex, not on a burrow-crossed palm, but in a bulletproof caddy, across petrochemical pebbles, watched ever so vigilantly by armed men in blue, as the Lord watches over the lilies of the field. And they chased the downtrodden, sleeping in the cathedral's shadow, so His Holiness would not be offended by these drunks wrapped in cardboard. And He dropped in on the dying, consumed by their love lust. The compassion played well with the fag bars in Frisco. After all, there were no lepers to be had for miles. The next poem I wrote is really the first poem I wrote about Shelter Island. I'm fairly a new resident there. There is a very old Presbyterian church on the main road on 114 going through Shelter Island. And driving past there one morning, just as the service was letting out, leaves had just gone through changing, and it was a scene that struck me. The church is on one side of the street as you go by, and across the street is a very old graveyard. And I wrote this poem called Shelter Island Presbyterian Sunday. It was a razor-perfect Sunday, half past an Indian October 11. The weighty oak doors spread wide as the preacher's arms on the chaste white church the Presbyterians raised in a simpler day, with a steeple true and near to heaven as a ladder could reach. Then out pour the faithful, men in solitary suits, angelic ladies unarmed with great hats felt and feathered, children suffering in white linen and spit-shined shoes, imagining blue jeans and baseballs and dollies in waiting, while deep in their shadows the old graveyard sits silent and collects falling leaves, knowing well it's but time no God-fearing man can refuse. Aware only the living can see daylight dance through stained glass, and the dead cannot glean when spring comes again. They just witness forever from below the hard surface, for the leaves fall but once in the season of May. The next poem is also a love poem that I wrote for my wife, called You to Me. You to me are the chapel of all that's true, the golden stroking smooth step, an antidote to the sickness of miserable existence. A sip of jasmine tea in a steamy hot tub, a woolly red sweater on a chilly porch swing, an electric first kiss rush, a staple-less gatefold beauty, the quiet confidence of an old house cat, the sharpness of new broken crystal, a mountaintop collecting sun above the morning mist. You're the way home, the flint to the poet's fire, the sound of crickets in the August hot night, a crackling log in a Christmas Eve snow, the soothing whisper of mother love, a goose-down wrap on a winter bed, a head-turner heartburner, silk stockings under blue jeans, the taste of sugar on a child's tongue, an extra big pie slice, the words to a sweet song, a cool wind kiss on a July high noon, moonlight through treetops, my forever dream in a jeweled box. The next poem is dedicated to my grandmother who passed away this past January. It was an interesting story. She died 19 years to the hour after my grandfather died, on the same day and the same hour of the day. She passed away at 2:30 in the afternoon, and my grandfather at 2 in the afternoon. This is her story. It's called The Ode to Molly McConville. Molly McConville died after her last noon sun Saturday in a lonesome white room that was far from her true home, so very tired and broken by 85 years of living, and from hiding so long deep inside of her own thoughts. Not a soul knew her truly, this Molly McConville, through her days 5 and 4 which passed by her so slowly. And she made life breath for many, including this poor heart, but she never strolled through the garden which she herself planted. She just shook back her sad rags like a martyr for love lost, till she could follow her Teddy to a place in forever, where he waited so saintly 19 years to the hour, for the sweet smiling eyes of his Molly McConville. Okay, this next poem I called First Contemplation. It was after I had read some poetry that was written by a Buddhist monk. And it's basically just images, and how a poet and an artist in general, I think, sees reflections of himself and the things around him. First Contemplation. A world full of images, paint splashes under blue and shadows, and looking too hard at each and every, they are me and I them all. A fragile petal, the sand under my feet that swallows my tracks, the meadow fence that causes 2 sides, and they reflect like a black pool in the pines. Am I the bony dog in the ghetto alley, or the windmill turning around itself? Am I the salmon struggling to death itself, or the mountain whose head lies in the mist? I am the earth whose soul is the churning inferno, and the clouds changing faces as instants pass. Am I the helpless babe in infant swaddling, or the winemaker's drunken song? Am I the beacon at the rough sea's edge, or the black shroud of a new moon midnight? Clamping shut my eyes, they are all gone away, or am I? The next poem I wrote about someone that I know who had suffered from schizophrenia, and I wrote this after seeing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I thought was, as funny as it was at times, was very tragic commentary on the way that we treat the mentally ill. It's called For Liz. We're afraid her brain is broken, they said. Maybe a short circuit, or a bad connection, or rust. We can't see too well, not the pain, but we're sure it's there, somewhere. She said so. Yet it's not her voice or words. She sings unfamiliar songs. She can't cope, nor can we. She may hurt herself, but not if we do it first. She's not well, but not sick, just out of whack. Let's analyze and psychologize and medicize her. Give each and every shattered piece and fractured logic, and polarize each wayward impulse. And if her brain still refuses to cooperate and tick just like the clock over Sigmund's couch, we might just have to squash it. And the final one is about Sag Harbor, and that is self-explanatory. Nestled safe in splendored fort, where red men slept beneath black bay skies, a haven for sea riders with salt-sprayed beards, I can still see the wood chips and their canvas-strained masts, and the oil lights and windows that beckon them home. I can hear the coxswain call, the slap rhythm of oars, sad cries of great humpbacks singing songs of such terror, drowning out lonesome sobs of the ladies in waiting. It was here that colonials and all the king's men fired shots of new rhetoric that struck down divine providence, lighting continents with wisdoms from this glistening sea jewel, first stop west from the old world on the road to forever, one moment in time, this place called Sag Harbor. Thanks very much.
I think this is better. Ida?
Oh, yeah.
It's really little sound. It's really a very nice couple upstairs who I said would be having a reading, so
I didn't notice
just
that.
don't play the radio too loud, okay? Which they usually don't anyway. But I think they're in a cleaning whirl, so. But I had no trouble back there hearing any. Okay, Dan, there are a couple of seats in case, just in case you feel like. I know some people like to stand. Okay, Dan Murray, I'm glad to welcome you back. And I used to work together, and now he's a professor at the State University of New York. Long Island. So let's welcome Dan Murray.
Actually, I'm teaching at Suffolk Community. This is a poem called Constellation, Rorschach. The vanity of imposing reason on the universe of personal events is another form of tyranny. Research, all dressed up in labs and grants, gives an absolute stranger a familiar face. Say Orion and his belt and the 7 drunken sisters are Russian, put vodka in the dippers. Say anyone's missing father can be found in a double-breasted blazer if you happen to be looking through palm trees in Florida. How interesting. How about that Count holding up his socks with wire gadgets and springs and pockets? Mine cajoles Cordelia into her heart on her sleeve if not in her mouth, or Lear in the mazes of the spirit in the black desert sky. Filter in Saint Sebastian, walking target, magnetize the hyphenated stars into a shower of arrows, and Orion could still be a quarterback bullet-passing poems. How charming that truth arrives, more or less than its description. This is a 7-part poem which is called 42nd Street Chronicle, which moves from the east side to the west side along 42nd Street, which I did this while attending seminars at the Graduate Center, City University, on the Mellon Foundation Fellowship, which was in modern drama. So a lot of the references and allusions are to drama and modernism. Anyway, 42nd Street Chronicle. The Automat. Mid-morning, the washed-up captain sleeps across from the bicycle messenger in goggles, who whistles, I wonder who's kissing her now. I look at my watch. Through emergency sirens, spiraling from a fire truck, drowning boombox doo-wop on the street. A yawning blonde in a black fedora comes in, with blue quarter moons under almond eyes and hair like silver fern. When she sits and sips, her hat becomes a dented black heart. Under blue aluminum mobiles of light bulbs, the messenger blows smoke in her direction, cones of breath from a horse's nostrils. She angles her legs, he moans. In the frosted Beardsley mirror, I watch her wrap her tendril arms around her ribs and curl into the end of her night or morning. The captain stirs his bowl of oblivion soup before he shifts back into sleep to glissando waves and whiplash. I eddy through the elegant spinning door, emerging with a cylinder of blueprints. The Whitney Branch Museum. The dark Y in Murch's pregnant bulb, under the more than quarter moon incandescence, in an envelope of glass, is the juice of reflection on invention. The tasket, a green and yellow basket. In West Orange, my father worked for Edison. teams manufactured filaments and fuses, dynamo junction box and socket for power plants with tendrils far past Morgan's mansion, bridging 1 million gaps in distribution from kitchen to kinetoscope. I sit under a tree growing in a lobby on the lit side of the planet, staring at the back of the head of a bald puppet protagonist in the limelight on the stage within a stage, and Charlie McCarthy was cousin to us all. Unroll the blueprints. From a tree, a boat that floats like a basket, bearing lines to feed invisible roots of gnarled trees. This poem is carburetor, not headlight. Grand Central Station. Under the vaulted ceiling mosaic, jeweled with dim stars, one the eye of a fish in a myth over marble pillar and balustrade under dust and ancient soot. Under the windows and doors arched like ends of freight cars, porters engineer Pullman carts through streamlined travelers flowing like molecules under the brass four-face clock, and up to the dull chandeliers with 6 gap-toothed tiers of bulbs, catalogs of destinations echo, through waiting rooms where catatonics sleep, homeless in the death chairs of amnesia, and over the squatter shacks still buried under the depot before terminal of Commodore Vanderbilt's erected dream, through Old Mount Prospect Tunnel under Park Avenue towers and speeding limos, the catatonic sleep in catacombs. Under the red signals flashing through steam, along tracks reaching for infinity, the homeless covered with cinder dust prowl through the tendril ruins of 4th Avenue piano factories and breweries of forgetfulness. The hour chimes, soft locomotive bells. The washed-up captain wanders underground, coffined in the 40 blocks to Harlem. The public library. On the sidewalk in front of the Lions, a gang of young street dancers, limbs yanked by invisible strings, flips and splits the money in a black felt hat. The blonde boards a downtown bus. Between the buildings on 41st, a river of wind darkens over Long Island. Max Ernst was there in the summer of 44. The messenger follows me into marbled Astor Hall, hypertrophies as he rubs his lizard eyes on his leather wings, a frottage in the shadows. I stare at frame, brace, and erector set, drawing close to the exit, then take the elevator up to the bird collection, to New Letters from Kerouac, thinking about Miss Fork and Mr. Knight, and how Joyce was burned in 1920 by the Society for the Prevention of Vice. Dirty McDowell's drawers not nice, blue garters and skin, you know. The deity ain't no nickel-dime bum show. I retrieve the blueprints from the coat room. The messenger waits, reading the Inquirer. Times Square. 3-card Monty and a steel drum band muffle a preacher with a portable mic, haranguing the patrons of a video peep show. Inside the Incense Pleasure Palace, uncensored soap opera circuses of sex, unmask the lust of the nightly lovelorn, chained to the logic of either or, angels and demons, Madonna whore, undulating in fantasies of zoom-lensed flesh, unredeemed by passion for the sake of pleasure, galvanized in the primitive delight in wet lips, the twitching of frog legs. High in nirvana, in the tower zippered with news of allegations of corruption, over martinis, sitar, and syncopated neon, chanting Sony, Midori, Coca-Cola, the messenger contradicts the blonde, insists there will be no dress rehearsal. The waiter wheels in a cart with burning candles. She lets down her hair, a waterfall of light. Over the river, helicopters pulse like electromagnetic dragonflies. The theater marquee flashes human prey. When I return from the phone booth, both he and the blueprints are gone. I chase him down to Little Shanghai, where he flags a cab and disappears. Theater Row. Spanish woman mates with a stud farm bull of a man in black catastrophe mask. Tongues dart in the garden of wisdom. Such a hunger only divinities could assuage. But a daughter is born from a wagon load of rational moment. She, the blonde, is eventually murdered for the crime of refusing to become everything mother wanted her to be. Old Civil War sets the mother free. No communion. Lizard on the wall says, obey, be what I want or I'll kill you. Our rebellion monsters take no curtain calls, but the blonde sees me as the lights go up. I go backstage to have her sign the playbill, tell her coincidence sustains the mystery, surveillance destroys creative psyche. She can get the blueprints back, she coos, and lifting the dove mask to her eyes, she smiles under the beak with silver wings. At a table in the West Bank Cafe, she slides a ring onto my middle finger, calling me by another name. The fit belies my mistaken identity. I barely know what my soul is craving. Mystery lures me into herself. We stroll from crowds to the Hudson River. Circle Line Pier. At the Hudson River, Miss Freedom sways in the oil green water, strains at her chains next to the gray USS Intrepid, decked with jet fighters facing the skyline and rockets aiming east, white-capped cliches in the rhetoric of ideologies. Moonlight hits the steel grid skeleton of a planned upright structure. Epiphany. Architects signal 200 stories to earphoned operating engineers, and crane buckets rise over the towers, freelance in the air, swing on radar beams to platforms on stilts, and pour the cement. There will be a view where there was none, above Con Edison generators, beyond snake charming spas and neon nudes, over Casbah cafes and parking lots where messengers meet and drunk captains sleep. There will be mind over the matters of sailors testing mathematics of dice, young girls dancing in double Dutch jump rope, confetti floating in New Year countdowns, and cruciform lanterns on palisades through holograms of electric blue mandalas. Still, the river will run to the sea.
Oh, that's a dynamite poem, Danny, you gloomy bastard. That's great, though.
This is called The Dancer. Like a wavering ribbon of heat waves on a highway through a jungle, her arms entice me as she spins in a whirlpool down to her toes, in an orbit diminishing into blue balls. She leaps and whirls. Her arms are back like wings. Her throat is glistening. Piano player sings. She knows it by heart, is giving it another name. Back in my room, a plate drops from the shelf and shatters on the floor. Fluid limbs extended. Suddenly I desire her as if I had one leg. And later on the train, I am taking to Buenos Aires to meet her at the water's edge as we arranged by secret telepathy. I see her stepping naked from the waves with open arms. We tango, and much later I say, "Ah, Sylvia, thank you for a lovely night and for returning my other leg." It's called A Toast to the Judge. I sink into a topless bar. Amaretto and the body riffs drift me into the dream. I want a woman who hears my poems, then speaks her own intimacy, naked recognition. The dancer winks about New Year's Eve in Coney Island bumper cars, making it on a rug with braided mink. Pleasure steers her strange canoe, and Dylan sings just like a woman. She wants dollars from the jukebox. I disappear in dust with the Pony Express.
That really happened.
This is a new poem, which I think I'm called Stud Poker. Stud Poker, Art Blakey at Sweet Basil. Brass cymbals swing copper reflections. Fire shadows sweep the walls. Behind old master of the beat, with Youngblood Harper face down, perfecting years with trumpet stripes. But solo never ends alone. We slide into a blue moon shoe, strut through what belongs to everyone. Piano flickers help me get my jacket off. I'll be 51 next month. Love, yellow taxis in the rain. Bass strings bass the melody. Lure a bored lady out of her lull. Defrost her platinum wishbones. She hands me a 10 of clubs. And her boyfriend Jack of beret and shades. Refrigerated twosome, waiting for alternatives. Saxophone and trombone in a getaway chase. These guys drive sound around in a limousine. King Blakey in the back seat, shaking up a cha-cha. Memory of harmony, shy but indelible. They lose reason in heavy traffic, insouciant safari beyond Boolean. With delivery men of midnight bread comes a luck change. Slap my hand. With unique Monique from Mozambique, it's Queen Mimi down from Montreal, and I'm looking at a royal flush. This is called An Ever Lesson. waste of time, decreed the suburban lawmaker, preening himself with bourbon and loyal echoes from his deputy, who whined then lines of Whitman's poetry, lisping spider to sick oxen manure. Pride is a silk tie and a sinecure. Nothing could corrupt my silent rage. That night I dreamt I was in a cortege dancing to an American fanfare. Whitman shaped horse dung into boutonnieres. Pointing the way to the town hall bell said, "Brown flower for a proud man's lapel." It's called the Westbound Track. The watch she gave me ticks in a pawn shop. No rosary but crumbs in my pocket. Shoebox on, solving her daily puzzle. I cross her words, put on my faults and go. To travel in vain on a subway train and perfectly balance my fears with doubts. Beads on the window, a network of rain, giggles and taxis down the grinding pane, blurring the face of a weary dunce, cracked on the skull with her dainty parasol. When wheels scream against steel, poison lilacs bloom from the bolts of third rail lightning.
We're hitting it there now, huh? That's a nice one.
I think I'll close with, I wanted to read a poem in memory of John Logan, who died November 7th, who was a friend and a teacher for me. And this is a poem of his to a young poet who fled. And it has a quote from Kierkegaard. It says, "Your cries make us afraid, but we love your delicious music." So you said you'd go home to work on your father's farm. We've talked of how it is the poet alone can touch with words. But I would touch you with my hand, my lost son, to say goodbye again. You left some work and have gone. You don't know what you mean. Oh, not to me as a son, for I have others, perhaps too many. I cannot answer all the letters. If I seem to brag, I add, I know how to shatter an image of the father. Twice have tried to end the yearning of an orphan son, but opened up in him and in me another wound. No, I say this, you don't know the reason of your gift. It's not the suffering. Others have that. The gift of tears is the hope of saints, Monica again and Austin. I mean the gift of the structure of a poet's jaw, which makes the mask that's cut out of the flesh of his face a megaphone, as with the goat-clad Greeks, to amplify the light gestures of his soul toward the high stone seats. The magic of the mouth that can melt to tears the rock of hearts. I mean the wand of tongues that charms the exile of listeners into a bond of brothers, breaking down the lines of lead that separate a man from a man and the husbands from their wives in these old burned glass panels of our lives. The poet's jaw has its tongue ripped as Philomel, its lips split and kissed beside the grave, the jawbone patched and cracked with fists and then with the salve of his fellows. If they make him bellow, like a slave cooked inside the ancient brass bowl, still that small machine inside its throat makes music for an emperor's guest out of his prize. Thus his curse, the poet cannot weep, but with a public and musical grief, and he laughs with the joys of others. Yet when the lean blessings come, they are sweet and great. My son, I could not make your choice. Let me take your hand. I am too old or young to say with you, I'd rather be a farmer in the hut, understood by swine, than be a poet misunderstood by men. That's from John Roach.
I asked for decided to come back again. For those of you who don't know me, when I'm not peering into my own soul, I spend my time peering into other people's mouths. I'm a dentist on Shelter Island, and this is really the love of my life, actually, but rarely I get a chance to get up and read in front of people, so I hope you enjoy what I have to say. The first poem is derived from a television show that I had seen one evening, and there was a photograph of Times Square, and on what I believe was originally the Allied Chemical building where the ticker is, there was an enormous Sony sign hanging on there, and I thought somehow that there was a strange, that I might have something to say about that, but in any event, this poem is called Sony. Times Square lit and dancing like a neon whore on hot tar, a boxcar full of bulbs in sync blink flickering madness, Satan's apples and fishnets hawk fantasy don't walk signs, peoples and peepholes, triple X's, 3-card Montes, little ones sucking fast bucks, crystal dreams and nickel vials, and above it all, where the ticker once proclaimed Japs surrender to MacArthur, a great white Sony with just a hint of a smirk. The second poem is a love poem for my wife, Vicki, who's here with my 2 daughters tonight. My youngest daughter, I think, is my greatest critic, so you may hear her chime in once in a while. It goes like this. We've gone 1 year toward forever, danced feather-footed on moonbeams and swung round the great starscape, sighing breaths of diamond dust. We've seen a gazillion tomorrows in crystal prism raindrops and tamed the fierce fires barehanded with a whip crack and a sotto voce, orchestrating sweet symphonies from such din of clang and clatter, clasped our hands to fend off the cold and braided our hearts against aloneness. Know always that all the words of man ever spoken in any voice or time could never paint the love I have for you. The next poem